Welcome to this week's episode of The Sacred Path. I am Rothi Midran Epkalu, your guide through the cosmos to the divine light of creation existing in the eternal present moment. In today's episode, we will be going back in time to an alternative reality, beginning with Thoth, beginning with the truth of the fabled city of Atlantis. My Atlantis. I say my Atlantis because in an alternate reality I all exists in now, only now, the advisor for this fair city. Allow me to rewind once again to my times in Chicago when I was working and living in Hyde Park. It was a warm summer day, so I decided to explore the neighborhood shops on my way to work. A sidewalk sign outside of one of the boutique shops catches my eye. School of Metaphysics, Past Life Readings. I figure, why not? I've got some extra money in my pocket. It's always interesting to get an external and unbiased opinion on the matters that are less concreted into our reality. Allow me to preface this by saying, not only had I never spoken to the person doing this reading before, but I had never even been to the shop. I was a complete and total stranger to the entire area. I browse around the shop, looking mainly at the handmade jewelry for inspiration and comparison, as I have also done work in this area, while I wait their finishing up with the current reading. In a few minutes, they motion for me to come over. I proceed to do so. We have a little small talk, just to break the ice. Have I done this before? I reply, never by anyone else formally. More random small talk, just to ease the mood, perhaps to get a feel for my energy before we commence. At no time in this discussion was there anything leading or personally informative discussed. So they know almost nothing about who I am and what my beliefs are. We sit facing each other. If I recall, we were holding hands as they began to connect to the energies of the Akash, where the records are kept. I bring this story up on today's episodes for a few reasons. First, because Thoth, the key focus of today's episode, is the record keeper of the Akash. And second, because of his and my own history of coming from Atlantis, as you will soon find out. Allow me to provide a little insight into past life readings. The normal procedure is a channel or medium enters a meditative state and begins a journey of the soul through the Akashic halls. They're usually seen as a literal hallway with many doors, only a few of these doors being accessible. Those doors that are able to be opened being the ones that most directly relate to the client who is receiving the reading at that time. And so the reading begins. An initial few moments of silence as she connects with my energy and the records. Her first words, after a few moments. This is unusual. I've never seen this before. She continued to describe how the records work, as I just did before. She continues, only in your case, all of the doors are open. It's as if you can walk freely through all the records of creation. I reply after pausing for a moment. Interesting. Let's continue, shall we? See what it holds to foretell. She proceeds to go back into the record and continues. The first place I'm seeing is Egypt, with you as a shaman. Bent down with your hands on the earth, with a large panther in front of you. It seems as if you are communicating with each other through the vibrations of the earth. Does this mean anything to you? I take a moment to reply. Even in this life, I follow the ways of the shaman. I was adopted into the Ojibwa tribe at a young age, learned their sacred teachings and that of the animal spirits. Egypt has always been a close place to me, and a place that I always felt sacred and as one of my guides and teachers. She replies, well, that makes sense. Let's see where else we're led. A few moments continue, and again she looks slightly puzzled. I don't know where I am. I've never seen anything like it. Give me a moment to see if I can get more information. A few moments later she begins. You are in a castle that looks like it is not only made of crystals, but actually grown out of them. It appears that you are an advisor, or maybe even a king. The entire castle and all of its contents seem to be formed of crystals. It took me a few minutes to realize where you were, and it can be nowhere else but Atlantis. Does this mean anything to you? I think for a moment to carefully choose my words. The waters have always been close to me, being a Pisces in this life especially. I've always had an interest in crystals, even having an intuitive knowledge of their abilities and a connection to their uses. So in many ways, it definitely makes sense. The session for my reading comes to a close. We exchange info and keep in touch. Meeting later in the month to attend a ceremony by the Ordo Templi Orientalis, where they invoke the energies of the Viking gods and Thor and rebuild the Rainbow Bridge in a spiritual realm. In this story, you can see the power of the mind in not only creating our reality, but in its energy if one has enough faith in it to be perceived by others. Perhaps reality is truly created in the mind, which brings us to today's show. We have a very special show lined up for you. Not only will I be speaking to Thoth, the record keeper of the Akash, but I have been informed that my own Atlantean dragon guide will be joining us. Telepathically, that is, for both of them, as both Thoth and Elohim, my dragon guide, exist far beyond the third dimension. In fact, far beyond the astral realm even, but they have agreed to join me in the astral for today's episode. So without much further ado, as you know, I am Rothi Midran Epkalu. This is The Sacred Path. My guests joining us on the astral realm, the immortal, arguably most prolific writer of all time, with over 30,000 books and texts documented to his name, credited to him, Thoth Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great one. And not to be upstaged, my own guide, the Akashic Fire Dragon, all the way from the ninth realm of Atlantis, Elohim. Thoth chimes in first. He can be a bit chatty. After all, writing 30,000 books plus, you tend to get the idea that he tends to speak a lot. It's about the time we set the record straight on Atlantis. All the lies and half-truths have been told for far too long. I speak up, but in your own words, all truths are half-truths. So how can the truth be known? One subject at a time, my friend. Let's set the record straight about Atlantis before discussing the Hermetic Code. As you are from there, Elohim, would you do the honors? If I must. Taking a moment to reply further. Let's begin with the fact that Atlantis was never supposed to exist in your plane of consciousness. Normally, it is held in the astral realm or above by a Merkaba that it uses for travel throughout the higher dimensions. If I may interrupt, I break in. Allow me to tell the people what a Merkaba truly is for those who do not understand. They both nod in agreement. A Merkaba is a light body vehicle used for soul journeys in higher planes of consciousness. Its name is actually derived from Egyptian Mer-Ka-Ba, meaning mind, body, and spirit. It is created by forming two pyramids, one pointing up, composed of and energized with solar energy, that of creation, and one pointing downward, composed of void, the energy that exists between all that is, 0-point energy as we call it. They are spun in opposing directions to create an energetic field and a ripple in time, so to speak, existing on all planes and no planes at the same time. With practice, one can also create one in the mind around one's own being, even in the third dimensional realm we exist in, which serves as a shield to protect negative entities and energies from being allowed or able to interfere with you. Elohim nods in agreement. May I continue? As I was saying, Atlantis was never meant to be in the third dimension. We were in the fifth dimension, on Earth's higher realms, over what you know as the Bermuda Triangle. When the Merkaba received an energy surge which disabled the lower pyramid, causing it to drop into your lower frequency and dimension. This failure also left part of our pyramid buried in the seas below. In recent years, in fact, there have been discoveries and releases of photographic evidence documenting this pyramid below the Bermuda Triangle. This falling into the ocean is also what caused the shift in your energy, the void in your time-space realm, which causes ships and airplanes to disappear when flying over and instrumentation malfunctions. I interrupt. So, wait a minute. I haven't noticed any ships or anything disappearing in the last few years. Why is that? Elohim replies, at long last, the energy of the pyramid has been fully disabled and dissipated throughout time. About 3 years ago, we obtained assistance from the Melchizedek tribe to disable it fully on the fifth dimension, correcting the rift in your time-space continuum on the third realm as well. I interject. That sounds very plausible and makes as much sense as any other reason I have heard of. I haven't noticed any anomalies in the last few years. Very intriguing indeed, my friend. Thoth speaks up, never at a lost words. Well, to be honest, I lost count how many books I've written, but that may be an exaggeration, but it is not of my doing. Can we please return to the subject of the show? Now that we've solved the mystery of Atlantis, that being my Hermetic code.
All you did is all the same, invokes Elohim.
All about me. Very well, if you must. Let's get this over with. I have work to do. I reply, yes, let's return to the matter at hand. Elohim, I realize you're being in charge of Atlantis. You're very busy. You've been a great friend and a wise advisor to me for many centuries. Much longer, in truth. I do appreciate your time for taking time to join us for this interview. Now can we please, as Atlantean brethren, please be peaceful and professional for the remainder of the show so we can get it over with as quickly as possible. Thoth responds, all we have is now. Let's go.
Ah.
Elohim growls in approval. With that in mind, let's get to the focus of our show, the Hermetic Code. Or if you prefer, the universal laws. As mentioned in last week's podcast, that the ninth dimension was the realm of the universal laws. That is exactly where they reside, affecting all creation other than that of the Godhead, which has created these very laws. The first law is the law of mentalism. In essence, it states that all creation begins in the mind. While I agree with this, I feel there should be a slight revision. Nature is created in the mind of God. It existed before the thoughts of man, and will remain long after, although mankind seems to be working to change that fact. Elohim nods in agreement. Thoth remains silent for a moment. Rarity for Thoth. He responds, "Okay, I can agree with that. Everything is mental, but nature is created by the divine mind. All that is nature, unnatural, is created by the mind of man." Alome voices his agreement as I reply, "Very well then, my friends. This is much like our Atlantean Brotherhood should be, and should act." Both Alome and Thoth nod in agreement. Rule number 2, the law of correspondence. As above, so below. As within, so without. I can agree with this. In fact, Alome has taught me, and I even know and understand the reason for this, is sacred geometry. Because the entire universe is created within alignment of the Fibonacci sequence, created by adding the sum of the previous numbers. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on. The human eye, as an example, under a microscope, appears exactly the same as a nebula or galaxy. This is not by coincidence or accidents. As you will learn later, there are no coincidence or accidents. Why do you think they say the eyes are the windows to the soul? Because they are a very reflection of it. Alome replies, "You have learned well." Thoth replies, "Very wise indeed." On with law number 3, vibration. This states that everything is in a state of movement. I think the reason there might be some confusion is because people are not looking within. This refers to not only physical movement, but also on an atomic level. As my friends have taught me, all is life. All life is created of life. Everything is composed of matter and void. That matter being only a small fraction of what we perceive, but appearing solid because the atoms are moving at such a high pace that they appear as such. Thoth chimes in, which leads us to our next law, polarity. Everything has duality that is manifest, positive and negative, much like a battery. Both are required for life to exist and creation to function. Without both aspects, there will be no life, no creation, and no movement. It will be stagnant and die. Very well said, my friend, which leads us to the next law, similar in nature. So much so that it could be argued that it is slightly repetitive. The law of gender. All is masculine and feminine, for both are required to create life. Is masculine and feminine not a simple extension of polarity? Thoth begrudgingly nods in agreement. Alome growls in approval. Our next law, that of rhythm, states that everything has a movement, like the tide. In many ways, I see this as an extension of the law of vibration and polarity, the continuous cycle, that of life, which brings us to our final law, that of cause and effect. One could surmise in many ways that this is a synthesis of all laws. The cause created in the mind within, which is then reflected back into the universe. The effect, so without. The vibration of it flowing like the tides from within to without. Positive to negative. Creation to void. And back to creation. Thoth chimes in. You have learned well.